Today we're going to be looking at a creepy website known as Erowid.org. Erowid is one of the internet's largest archives of information about psychoactive substances. The site contains vaults filled with people's personal experiences, documenting the effects of different substances for educational, medical, academic, and research purposes. The website operates as a non-profit public archive focused on harm reduction. It does not present itself as pro-drug or anti-drug, but rather as a place where information and first-hand experiences are collected and preserved. The reports on this website can be extremely useful for understanding how dangerous and unpredictable certain substances can be, especially when viewed through the personal experiences of people who have taken them. If you enjoy this style of content, please like and subscribe. It seriously helps the channel grow. This story begins with a poster explaining how they ruined their life through a series of bad decisions. The poster says that on a nice Saturday night, they decided to take some benzos after a stressful week at work. They had no plans and no responsibilities for the weekend, so they figured they'd get messed up and chill. Where I funked up. My life just took a horrible turn for the worst. I am not at my lowest point, however, thanks to being out on bail and away from the hellishness of being confined to a jail cell. This is where the post becomes disturbing for two major reasons. First, the poster says he had zero benzo tolerance at all. The benzos made him feel detached, almost like he was drunk, but without any of the euphoric effects. Where I funked up on a warm Saturday night 10 days ago was with the choice to eat the benzos, Xanax, and Valium. I do not have a benzo tolerance and rarely use them. I had finally come across some and decided to eat a few. At around 5 p.m. Saturday, I took the pills, figuring this would mellow me out after the hard week I had at work. I had no plans that night or the next day, so I made plans to get intoxicated. I had a small collection of acid and 5-MeO-DMT, which I had not touched in months, but I did not specifically plan to trip. Around 6 p.m., I was definitely intoxicated in a drunken-like way, but with less euphoria and some slight depression and confusion. I stumbled to my small substance collection and took more Xanax. I wanted to be a little bit more into oblivion because I was feeling slightly depressed, which was from the benzos in the first place, but I didn't realize it at the time. From 6 to 7 p.m., I spent my time stumbling around outside in my yard, feeling almost like a kid. I ran around and rolled in the grass. Then I got up and took off running into the house and back to my room. I pushed on the closed door, thinking it was open a crack, and my face whacked right into it. I could definitely feel the pain despite my intoxication. Instead of calling it a night, the poster goes into his room and finds even more drugs. This is where the story takes a much crazier turn. In his room, he finds a strip of acid and takes it, something he admits he would never do sober. To make things even worse, he also smokes DMT. Almost immediately, the experience becomes terrifying. So what are acid and DMT? Acid and DMT are psychedelics that can completely distort someone's perception of reality. They can make people see, feel, and believe things that aren't actually happening. Some people describe these substances as spiritually enlightening. Others, however, describe them as panic-inducing, disturbing, or psychologically overwhelming. I got into my room and got into my drugs. I pulled out a strip of Futurama blotter acid somewhere around 7 p.m. and ate it. I got really excited, thinking I was going to blast off to some wonderful psychedelic reality that I had read about but never had the courage to attempt. I then got out my aluminum foil pipe and put an eyeballed amount of 5-MeO-DMT in. This would definitely not be something I would do sober. The same goes for the acid. I inhaled the rough-tasting substance and held my breath. Soon, a wang-wang-wang noise surrounded me, like nitrous but much more menacing. A tense feeling spread through my body. I felt my heart get squeezed and then break, and I felt like I was bleeding all over myself internally. I was so scared but knew there was nothing I could do, so I just tried to accept that I was going to die for sure. I saw a bright white light, and I couldn't see anything else. I do not remember what else happened. The next thing I knew, I was outside, lying in my yard and twitching all over violently, but not quite seizure-like. I saw the clouds morphing shapes and colors. I saw all imaginable colors floating through the sky. The sun was setting, so I guess this was around 7:45. I also heard voices and strange music that could never be synthesized. It sounded very alien and started to frighten me. I got up off the ground and started to stop twitching. I thought I was coming down from the acid, since I was confused. At this point, I don't think I remembered smoking the DMT. I only thought I was coming down from the acid already. Maybe it was because the DMT trip seemed to last many hours when it only lasted minutes, but I can't be completely sure. I went into the house, which took a lot of effort because I was very uncoordinated. Everything was liquid, and I became convinced this was actually the real world, and that my experience of sober reality before this trip had tricked me into thinking solids existed. Everything seemed so real, clearer than ever before, despite the melting, fractals, and distortions. At this point, the OP doesn't even realize he's still tripping anymore. In this state, he becomes convinced that he needs to leave his house because something horrible is going to happen to him if he doesn't. I remember trying to figure out how to open a beer can. I sat on my kitchen table, pressing the tab in the wrong directions, and could not do it. I ended up cracking a hole in it with a juice can opener and sipping through it. I kept hearing the strange alien music getting louder, and I heard voices in specific directions that startled me. I do not remember the specifics of what the voices said, but suddenly it became apparent that I had to get out of my house or something horrible was going to happen to me. I remember running out my front door in a panic. Most of what happened next is pieced together from my neighbor's account, who was an acquaintance, and the police reports. I do recall some flashes of the events, but most are clips that are a few nanoseconds in length that I can't accurately describe. From this point on, most of what happened had to be pieced together from police reports and the neighbor's account. The OP was so messed up that he ran across the street to his neighbor's house and started digging through their mailbox. When the neighbor came outside and asked what he was doing, the OP just stared at him like an animal. Then he screamed that he would find the answer at the neighbor's house. Sensing that something was seriously wrong, the neighbor asked, "Do you need me to call an ambulance?" I ran to my neighbor's house across the street and past a big yard. The houses are spread out a good bit around here. I went up to his mailbox and dug my hands inside. He must have seen me run up to his door because he came out right away and said, "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" with a slightly threatening but confused tone. I do remember him saying this, but barely. All I did was stare at him. He said I looked like a frightened, insane animal ready to pounce. He took a step back and balled up his fists. "You don't look so good. How about we take a walk back to your house?" I yelled. He told me to come. He told me I would find my answer here. I then sat down and curled up in a ball. "Do you need me to call an ambulance?" Then the OP snapped. Then I snapped. I don't know and can't guess what the funk was going through my head at this point. I screamed in a non-human way, as it was later described, and tore into my neighbor. I beat and kicked at him with all I had. At first, he acted defensively and put up his arms to defend himself. Then he ran back into his house and came out with a can of mace. I ran away, sensing danger. It came to me again, apparently, that I had to get into my neighbor's house. It was extremely important to my survival. By this time, it was night. My neighbor had gone back inside to call the cops. I walked around the back of his house to his sliding glass doors. I remember touching the glass and wondering what was stopping my finger because I could see right through the door. I thought of it as a force field of some type that was a test. If I could pass the test of getting past this freak but purposely placed occurrence, I would find what I was looking for. I picked up a small metal table and whirled it into the glass force field with all the strength I had. It broke the glass and kept going about 5 feet. I walked through the destroyed force field and felt like I had accomplished an important step of some kind of goal I was going after, which I unfortunately can't remember. I heard footsteps coming fast from the other side of the house. I sensed danger and leaped up the steps that were to my left. I went into a dark room and saw a glowing clock. Its red letters burned into my memory, and now I cannot look at digital clocks without getting intense anxiety and confusion. I picked up the clock and held it. Then my neighbor ran in, flicked on the light, and unleashed hell onto me. I remember thinking something like I was being attacked by supernatural forces. I couldn't breathe or see. My upper body was burning, and I literally thought I had caught on fire. I fought for my life and thrashed into everything with my fists. I stumbled around and fell down the steps I had walked up. I screamed so loud that many neighbors arrived before the cops did, keeping their distance. When the police arrived, the OP was still inside his neighbor's house, screaming and breaking things. When the cops arrived, my neighbor was on the ground holding his head. I was in the house, breaking things and screaming. Cops rushed in with guns drawn. "Get down on the ground now." The OP admits that he couldn't understand the officer's words. To him, they sounded like meaningless gibberish. Then, suddenly, he felt two painful jolts. The police had tasered him. I couldn't understand language. Everything was just sounds at this point. I didn't know what language was, so I was unable to follow the pig's instructions. Then I felt a stab, and my body seized. It was the most painful thing I have ever felt, and I can't imagine anything worse. They had shot me with a taser, 2 darts stuck in me, blasting me to the ground in a silenced, choking agony. The paramedics came and treated me on the scene, now in my neighbor's yard, with saline for my eyes and a bandage for my hands, which were badly beaten. They gave me an examination of my blood pressure and heart rate, then said I was okay to be put into police custody. Apparently, they repeatedly asked me what I had taken, and finally, I answered, shrooms. The OP was charged with multiple crimes, including assault, public intoxication, disorderly conduct, vandalism, trespassing, and possession. His bail was set at $3,500. I would rather not go into detail about the jail cell because it will induce unpleasant flashbacks, as writing this has already done. I will just say it was hell, to understate it. The cops were real assholes to me. When I got to the police station, they literally threw me in my jail cell and said, "You are funked." I was charged with assault, public intoxication, disorderly conduct, vandalism, trespassing, and possession of a Schedule 4 substance. I had 5 Xanax pills in my pocket. I was bailed out by a close family member who was severely disappointed and upset with me. The bail was set at $3,500. It was a hell of a journey to hell. I will never trip again on anything. I have lost all desire for altered states. Plus, I now will face jail soon and a long probation. My lawyer says he will try to negotiate a 30-day sentence, but he can't promise it will be that small. My neighbor was cool about it. Well, not cool, but as cool as someone could be in his situation. I called him and apologized, and he told me what happened. He didn't lecture me at all about drugs or my actions. At the end of our somewhat brief conversation, he said, "Good luck," and hung up. This report is one of the craziest things I have ever read. One bad decision led to a night that caused lasting damage for everyone involved. This trip report shows how dangerous substances can become when they're mixed together. By the end of the story, the OP says he lost all desire to ever trip again because of what he had done while he was under the influence. This report is one of the most unsettling examples of how quickly one bad decision can spiral into something life-changing. What started as someone trying to escape a stressful week turned into confusion, violence, police, jail, and trauma for everyone involved. By the end of the report, the poster says they lost all desire to ever trip again, not because they simply had a bad night, but because they had to face what they had done. If there's anything to take away from this story, it's that mixing substances can be extremely dangerous, especially when someone is already in a bad headspace. But that's all for today's video. If you enjoyed this disturbing internet deep dive, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment what topic I should cover next, and check out the videos on screen right now.